There's mistakes made investing on both sides of the border. They get so excited about investing in the US that they don't get the proper consultation. They end up spending a lot of money for no good reason. My philosophy is to only make your structures as complicated as they absolutely have to be.
Welcome to the Thought Leader Revolution with Nikki Ballou. Join the revolution. There's never been a better time in history to speak your truth, find your freedom, and make your fortune. Each week, we interview the world's top thought leaders and learn the secrets of how they built a 6 to 7 figure practice. This episode has been brought to you by eCircleacademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. I'm your host, Nikki Ballou, and boy, do we have an exciting guest lined up for you today. Today's guest is a dear friend of mine. He's a brother from another mother. He also happens to be one of the leading thought leaders helping Canadians navigate the fraught perils of investing in U.S. real estate when it comes to things like legal and especially taxation. I am speaking, of course, of none other than the one, the only, the legendary, the Michael Matthew. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thanks so much for having me, Nikki.
Good to have you here, brother. So, Michael, why don't you start by just giving us a backstory of how you've come to become this expert on investing in U.S. and dealing with taxation issues?
I've been a professional accountant for almost 35 years. In fact, 2 days from now, it'll be exactly 35 years. And over the last 15 years or so, I started attending real estate investment conferences, both in Canada and the US. And by talking to people, I quickly came to the conclusion that one of the biggest areas of weakness for Canadians is they didn't like dealing with taxes. They didn't understand how the taxes work in Canada, let alone in the US, and they also were confused about how to set up their businesses in terms of structuring. And when I asked them why they did what they did, it came down to one of two things. They either set themselves up the same way that the first person they spoke to did it, or the last person they spoke to did it. The problem was it's such a small group of Canadians that were doing this investing that I knew those same people, and they didn't know why they were doing what they were doing either. So it's very much a case of the blind leading the blind. And I decided that since I'm very comfortable dealing with taxes, I deal with CRA on a weekly basis, that this is an area that I could contribute to help my fellow Canadians, especially those who want to invest in the US, and deal with those matters that, frankly, they don't want to deal with. And even if they do try to, they do a poor job of it.
Okay, so Michael, maybe you can start by sharing a story or two, a horror story or two, some folks who've done it wrong, what that looks like, and then maybe also then give us a couple of stories of people that you've helped avoid the horror stories.
I had a client that had already started investing in the US before he came aboard with me. And one of the things that you have to do, obviously, is you have to fund that purchase somehow. And he just transferred it from a company that he already had set up in Canada. And after telling him that that was going to cause an interest to be imputed, extra income, we quickly realized that it would wipe out the whole benefit of doing what he's doing, because he would be taxed on all this extra income that he didn't anticipate. So we restructured his loan arrangement so it's coming from him personally. And by doing that, we avoided this whole interest income that he didn't even know about. And we're talking tens of thousands of dollars, given the scale of his investment.
So does this happen often? Do investors kind of like go into these structures not knowing what kind of tax implications are there, and then getting socked with a big tax bill?
It happens too often, I would say. And it's because they get so excited about investing in the US that they don't get the proper consultation before they do so.
Right on, right on. Okay, so tell me another story of somebody who was about to do something dumb or actually did something dumb.
I've seen people that get too excited and they want to set up everything, sort of a Cadillac type setup before they decide if they're even going to buy a property. And they end up spending a lot of money for no good reason, simply because they were told, well, that's how you do things. And my basic philosophy is to only make your structures as complicated as they absolutely have to be, as is absolutely necessary. There's fine structures out there that people are taught that work very well, but not at the scale of business that they're operating at. So they'll have a structure that works fine for 3 to 5 properties, and they have typically 0 to 1 property. And the setup actually ends up costing them money rather than saving them money.
Wow. So, right now, there's a lot of Canadians that are wanting to invest in the US because real estate in Canada seems to have taken a bit of a hit, especially like single family homes and condominiums, right? You want to talk a little bit about the state of investing in Canada for a little bit and why this is making some American markets appear more attractive to Canadian investors?
Especially in high demand areas such as in Toronto area, Vancouver area, prices have been bid up so high that it's causing a great deal of difficulty in terms of people who want to get into the market. It's also creating problems for people who have already started. So I have a client that bought a condo, a pre-construction one, so one that hasn't been built yet, for over $1 million, and it's coming time to close on it, and the appraisal came back for less than 800,000.
Wow.
And no bank is lending at 100% loan to value. So on that 800,000, they'd be lucky to get 560,000 appraisal. So basically, they're short by half the purchase price.
That's crazy. They can't even
Yeah.
afford to buy that, right? Most people, they can't. What, they're going
No,
to dip in their own pockets for that?
no, they're going to default and they're going to lose their deposits.
So how
So
much are deposits typically in these situations?
deposits on that would have been pretty close to $100,000.
Whoa. So they're like eating 100K just to get out of a crappy situation.
Yes, unless if the builder wants to be strict about it, that's what will happen. If the builder is willing to work with them, they could perhaps renegotiate it. And the only reason why the builder would be willing to do so, frankly, is because they don't think they can sell it to anyone else at anywhere near the original price. So they'd have to sell it for the current market price. And that means that they'll be taking a hit of several $100,000 themselves.
So either way, for builders, this isn't a good situation either, right? Because like if they insist on keeping the $100,000 deposit and a lot of people default, which they probably will, then they're going to have to turn around and try to sell those properties for a big cut in price anyways. And they don't have a guaranteed buyer. But if they work with the person who originally bought the pre-construction and they renegotiate, they'll still take a hit, but they may take less of a hit, and at least they have a guaranteed buyer, right?
Right, and it avoids a lawsuit. And the builder would likely prevail in a lawsuit over the original buyer, but that's going to take years for that to settle. In the meantime, the builder has to pay his own bills. And as a CFO for a residential construction firm, I know that's not going to work out too well for the builder
No, no.
with all those defaults.
So Canada is in a situation where pre-construction condos, as an example, are not nearly as attractive as they used to be, say, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that's why people who have investment money are looking for alternatives to pre-construction condos. So multifamily is hot right now. A lot of people are talking about multifamily. And then US investment opportunities are also relatively hot because people think they're better opportunities, as you said, for lower prices, et cetera there. But a lot of people going into the US haven't got a clue what they're doing. Do they have more of a clue of what they're doing in Canada, or are they still making a lot of mistakes when they invest in Canada as well?
There's mistakes made investing on both sides of the border. It's just if you don't really know what you're doing when you're investing in the US because you haven't had the proper guidance, it's just a multiplied effect because now you're dealing with taxes in 2 countries instead of 1. And if you make a mistake, it could greatly multiply the loss that you're going to feel because of having to deal with 2 sets of tax rules.
So if Canadian investors right now have, I don't know, say 100,000, 250,000, 500,000, and they're looking to invest, walk us through how you as an advisor would help them determine whether they should try to invest in Canadian multifamily, whether they should go to the US, how they should start. Just walk us through that whole process.
I want to first find out what are their goals, what are they trying to do with their real estate investment? Because it could range anywhere from we really like going to Florida, we're sick of just renting a place there. We'd rather buy a vacation property that we can use or our friends and family can use, and it's there 100% guaranteed every time we want to go, all the way up to people who want to start investing in large apartment buildings because they have a group that they put together and want to go after those sorts of returns. So basically, it depends on your goals, and that will also then drive the type of structure. So if it's just a vacation property for yourself, you probably don't need to set up any other structures. If you're going into a large apartment building, then you absolutely need to have a separate structure for liability protection and many other issues like that.
What about there's companies that are like Canadian, maybe originally, and they're going in with like a capital fund approach to go purchase like apartment buildings, multifamily opportunities, and they're soliciting funds from Canadian businesses and Canadian investors. So, what would you say to Canadian investors and businesses that are presented with those types of opportunities?
It's definitely a way to do it. Their REITs or REIT-like structures are being set up to do exactly that.
Yeah,
And it just depends on your goal. What you'll find with that structure is all the heavy lifting, so to speak, is done by who's ever running the group. And you're essentially just a passive investor. So that while that limits your risk if they're doing their job well, it also limits your return because on a percentage basis, you can get a far bigger piece of the pie if it's your own deal as opposed to someone else's. That's just the way it works out. But
for
some
sure.
people find that they'd just rather give up a piece of that pie so that they don't have to worry about the day-to-day management of the project. There's someone else that's responsible for that. So it really, as I said, comes down to what are your investment goals, because that really drives everything else that is involved in the process.
So even these funds that are going down into the US may not necessarily be doing all the correct things from a structural point of view, right? I'm sure you've run into things like that. So how do you advise the people that are setting up these funds to solicit money from Canadians to go down into the US?
That has to be done very carefully. If you're doing that, then you're going to fall under securities legislation. So in Ontario, it's the Ontario Securities Commission or OSC, and they're very, very strict about how you do things. So you need to get the proper advice to make sure that you're compliant because they'll shut you down very, very quickly if you're doing things incorrectly and it comes to their attention. And if they do things correctly, though, this can be quite an attractive investment for many people.
Right on. So step back for a second and maybe talk to me a bit about like who would be an avatar, as it were, an ideal client, an ideal investor for this type of situation. Maybe walk me through that for a bit.
It's going to be someone, I would say, in the age range of 40 to 60. That's probably the typical one. So there's someone who's looking to build up some income for their retirement, especially, but it's not someone who needs that income today. So it gives us time to find properties and help them set up properly and help maximize those opportunities and grow from there.
Okay. And typically, what kind of investment capital are we talking about that they need to have to be able to do this effectively, properly, et cetera?
It used to be that all cash was the way that people went in. So that would involve often getting some sort of loan, perhaps a HELOC against your existing equity in Canada and going down. But now there are multiple providers who give financing to foreigners, Canadians especially, to purchase U.S. real estate. After Americans, of course, the number one investor in the U.S. real estate are in fact Canadians.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. So we're the number one foreign investor in American real estate.
correct.
So the opportunities are real for Canadians should they go about it properly.
Right. And so you're looking at down payments in the range of 30 to 35%. That's basically what you're going to have to come up with. So a bit more than the typical investment property in Canada, which is often around 20%.
Okay.
But you are able to finance the rest, which certainly allows you to go further. Instead of maybe just buying one property, it allows you to leverage your investment and get two properties because you're only having to come up with a smaller portion than perhaps you originally thought.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. You know, right now I'm doing this interview with you from Houston, Texas, and I'm in Harris County in Houston. And the home that my friend is in, it's a single family home. It's beautiful. It's huge. And this same home in Canada would be 2.5 to 3 times the price. So for someone wanting to come to a place like Harris County in Texas to invest, whether they're buying their single family home for themselves as a vacation home or a second home, or they're buying property here for investment purposes that people can rent from them, the opportunities are real. You know, living in Harris County would be on the income that I have in Toronto, I could have a significantly bigger place than I have in Toronto, living in a major American city. And that blows me away. What are your thoughts on that?
That is one of the major advantages is the lower price of entry. I know I was looking at buying some homes in Ohio for rental income.
Yeah.
And we're talking 5 houses. The total asking price was $246,000 for the 5 of them.
Wow.
You wouldn't want to even look at a house in Toronto that was selling for $246,000.
That would be like a closet, right?
It may be a nice garden shed.
Yeah, nice garden shed. That's it.
But that's it. So, and these are not large houses, but Ohio is essentially a renter state. So there's lots of people that are looking for houses to rent there. We ended up not closing on the deal simply because the properties weren't well maintained, because we did what I tell people to do, which is get the properties inspected before you buy. And so that was probably the best $350 I ever spent, because it saved us taking on at least one of the properties what would have been a significant nightmare, because among other things, the lot was graded so it sloped into the house, which means every time there was a rain, there was potential for water being forced into the basement, which makes no sense.
No, that's ridiculous. That's stupid.
Yeah, I
From my
agree.
point of view. Okay. So we're talking that if you're someone who lives in a market like Toronto or Vancouver, or even Calgary or Edmonton right now in Canada, that are markets that housing prices have gone higher. Although obviously those markets, the housing prices are not as high as Toronto or Vancouver. You can go into an American market and your dollar can go a lot further depending on which market you go into. And if you're a Torontonian and you want to invest in like a top tier US city like Houston and Harris County or Dallas, or Florida, Miami, Jacksonville, etc., you can be in a top tier city similar to what you're used to in Canada, and you can spend a lot less both for investment property as well as for property that you want to buy and live in yourself. And I think all that's super important for people to be aware of. And that's why you need good advisors like yourself to show people how to think this through. Most people don't think investments through properly. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely. They fall in love with the property, or they fall in hate with the property simply because, oh, I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be living there if it's an investment property. It's simply something that you're offering to other people. And so it really comes down to the numbers. It's really about the bottom line. And with the proper analysis, you can determine if this is going to be a good investment or perhaps, a very borderline investment.
Yeah, amen. So, Michael, if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
Best way is simply by email. My email address is Michael, Michael, at askmichael.ca.
Okay,
Michael at askmichael.ca.
we're going to make sure we put that in the show notes, man. You know, you should probably start using the Michael brand and put that in your email address somehow, man, because that's something you're starting to become known for. But we're going to make sure we put that in the show notes. So let's wrap this up by having you give us in bullet point form your top 3 pieces of advice. This is what we call the expert action steps. Go.
The first thing you should look at when considering where to invest is it landlord friendly? Because if it isn't, and you get a bad tenant in a place like California or New York State, for instance, it could take a year or more to get them out, during which point you've had zero income. And that's obviously going to put a tremendous strain on all your cash flow projections. So that's number one. Number two, you want to look at a place that has population growth. And why is that population growing? So if you are investing in Florida, let's say, with a project that accommodates a seniors residence, as an example, that could be a great fit because a lot of seniors are looking to retire to Florida. If, however, you're not catering to that market, you may want to be a little bit more careful about which town you start your project in, because you could be having a product that doesn't appeal to the primary buyer in that area. And the third thing is you need to get the proper advice so that you avoid making some of the mistakes that we mentioned, and you're able to concentrate on what you want to do, which is find a property and run it, as opposed to worrying about all the taxes and all the hidden regulations that you may not be aware of.
Yeah, these are 3 excellent expert action steps. Thank you, the Michael Matthew, the legend himself, the man who knows how to make your real estate investments in the United States of America pay if you're a Canadian. Folks, he's the real deal. Take advantage of it. Send him an email. And if you're looking to invest in the United States, make sure you dot your I's and you cross your T's. And the best way to do that is by getting the right expert advice from the Michael Matthew. Brother, thanks for coming on the show. Really great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. And that's a wrap.
This episode has been brought to you by eCircleAcademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.